In 2008, two people were admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Rhode Island. Both had just come from meditation retreats. They were not beginners with bad technique. They followed the instructions exactly. And what a neuroscientist discovered over the next 15 years is that the Buddha warned about this. Meditation was never designed to be practiced alone. He built it as steps 7 and 8 of an 8-step system. Steps 1 through 6 were supposed to come first. They deal with how you live, how you speak, how you earn your living. The parts that have nothing to do with sitting still. The modern world removed them, and the thing that was designed to free the mind started breaking it instead. Her name was Willoughby Britton. She was a psychology resident at Brown University, and the two patients she saw that year, one who had done a 10-day silent retreat, expecting peace, and left in psychosis, would send her on a 15-year investigation into a question no one in the meditation world wanted to ask. What if the practice everyone calls safe is only safe when you use it the way its inventor intended? Britton had no reason to study meditation harm. She was researching how meditation helps depression. That was the clean story, the one with funding and optimism, and a straight line from cushion to cure. Then two patients arrived on the psychiatric ward at Butler Hospital in Providence within the same month. Both had attended meditation retreats. Both were experiencing hallucinations, paranoia, and a complete disconnection from reality. One was a woman in her 40s who had signed up for a 10-day silent vipassana retreat. She had no psychiatric history, no history, no trauma diagnosis, no drug use. She sat, followed the instructions, observed her breath, observed her thoughts, and on day 7, the boundary between her thoughts and the outside world dissolved, not in the way meditators describe as a breakthrough, in the way a psychiatrist would describe as psychosis. She told the intake nurse she could hear the walls breathing. Britton did not dismiss it. She started asking a question that the meditation research community had been avoiding for decades. How often does this happen? She spent the next 15 years building the most comprehensive study of meditation-related adverse effects ever conducted. It is called the neuroscientist of contemplative experience. And the numbers are not small. 58% of meditators in mindfulness-based clinical programs reported adverse effects. Not discomfort, not mild restlessness. Effects that included anxiety, panic, emotional flooding, dissociation, and in some cases, psychosis. 37% reported effects that impaired their ability to function, to work, to maintain relationships, to leave the house. 6% developed effects that lasted longer than a month. These were not people doing extreme practices in caves. These were people in clinical programs designed by psychologists, programs with facilitators and intake forms and consent waivers. And the practice at the center of every one of those programs was mindfulness, a word borrowed from a 2,500-year-old language that does not mean what the modern world thinks it means. The Pali word is sati. Every English translation renders it as mindfulness, and most meditation apps define it as bare attention, watching your thoughts without judgment. But the Pali root of sati is not about watching. It means to remember, not remember the past, Remember what leads toward suffering and what leads away from it. The Buddha's version of sati was not passive observation. It was active discernment, a trained awareness that knows the difference between a thought that frees you and a thought that traps you. Modern mindfulness kept the attention and removed the remembering. It kept the lens and threw away the map. And here is the part that shifts everything. A monk in 5th century Sri Lanka had already mapped exactly where these breakdowns happen. 1,500 years before Britain opened her lab. His name was Buddhaghosa. He was a compiler, an organizer, a man who took the sprawling teachings of the Pali Canon and organized them into the most detailed map of meditative experience ever written. He called it the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, and buried inside it is a sequence of 16 stages that every serious meditator passes through on the way to insight. Stages 1 through 5 are pleasant. The meditator sees things clearly, feels joy, experiences calm, and then stage 6 arrives. Buddhaghosa called it Bhanga Jnana, the knowledge of dissolution. This is where everything the meditator has been observing starts to fall apart. Not metaphorically, perceptually. The solid world becomes unstable. The sense of self flickers. Thoughts arise and vanish before they can be completed. After dissolution comes fear, then misery, then disgust, then a desperate desire to escape the practice entirely. Buddhaghosa grouped stages 6 through 10 and gave them a name. The dukkha jnanas, the knowledges of suffering, and he did not describe them as failures. He described them as the path. The meditator is supposed to pass through them, but only, and this is the part that matters, with a teacher who knows the terrain, inside a system that holds the meditator, while the ground dissolves beneath them. It is like climbing a mountain where the trail passes through a storm zone at 8,000 feet. The storm is not a sign you are lost. It is a sign you are on the path. But if no one told you the storm was coming, if you are alone with an app and a pair of headphones, and the wind starts, you do not know whether to keep climbing or jump. Buddhaghosa mapped this 1,500 years ago. Britain documented it with brain scans and clinical interviews in 2021. They found the same thing. The question is, if these crisis zones are predictable, if the tradition itself anticipated them, then why did the Buddha build a path that passes through them at all? At all. And the answer is in a single Pali word that changes how you understand everything the modern world calls meditation. If this is the first time you are hearing that meditation has a dark side the tradition itself anticipated, take a moment and subscribe. This channel breaks down the teachings the Buddha actually gave, not the simplified versions. And if you have ever had a meditation experience that felt wrong, something no one warned you about, stay with this video, because the word we are about to look at is the one that used to describe exactly what happens when you meditate without the rest of the system. And it is the reason a 1,500-year-old warning and a 21st century neuroscientist are pointing at the same thing. The Pali word is Mika Samadhi. It appears in the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's recorded teachings, and it translates as wrong concentration, not weak concentration, not beginner concentration, not lazy concentration. Wrong concentration. The Buddha said that a person can sit for hours, achieve deep focus, enter states of profound stillness, and still be practicing miksha samadhi, because the problem was never the quality of the attention. The problem was what the attention was sitting on top of. Think of it this way. Meditation without the rest of the path is like a pressure cooker with no release valve. The heat builds. Concentration intensifies whatever is already in the mind. Unprocessed grief, suppressed anger, distorted perception, old trauma that never had a name. Without a release valve, the pressure does not transform anything. It just builds until something cracks. The Buddha did not teach meditation as a way to calm down. He taught it as steps 7 and 8 of an 8-step system called the Noble Eightfold Path. And the first 6 steps, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, are not warm-up exercises. They are the foundation. In Pali, that foundation has a name, sila. Every English translation renders it as morality or ethics, and that translation makes Western audiences flinch. It sounds like religion imposing rules. But sila is not a set of rules imposed from outside. So, it is the structural integrity that makes concentration safe. It is the release valve. The Buddha's argument was precise. If you sit down to meditate, carrying the residue of a life lived in conflict, lies you have told, harm you have caused, a livelihood that depends on exploiting others, then concentration will not dissolve that residue. It will illuminate it. Every unresolved thing you have been avoiding will surface under the bright light of a focused mind. And without sila, without having done the work of aligning your life first, you will not know what to do with what surfaces. That is mikkha samadhi. Deep focus without a foundation. A powerful engine in a car with no steering. The Mikshata Sutta is explicit. Wrong concentration leads to wrong knowledge. Wrong knowledge leads to wrong liberation. You feel free, but you are not. You feel like you have seen the truth, but you have seen a distortion magnified by a lens with no correction. The Buddha considered this more dangerous than no practice at all, because a person who has never meditated knows they do not know. A person in miksha samadhi believes they do. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because in 779, someone deliberately removed the valve. His name was John Kabat-Zinn. He was a molecular biologist at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. He had studied Zen Buddhism and Vipassana meditation. He had experienced their power firsthand, and he had a genuine problem to solve: chronic pain patients who had exhausted every medical option. He believed meditation could help them. He was right. But he faced an obstacle. American hospitals in 1979 would not prescribe a Buddhist practice. The word Buddhist was enough to stop the conversation. So Kabat-Zinn made a decision that would change how the Western world thinks about the mind for the next half-century. He extracted the attention component of sati, the watching, the observing, the non-judgmental awareness, and removed everything else. He removed sila. He removed the Eightfold Path. He removed right view, right intention, right speech. He removed the ethical framework that the Buddha had built as the container for concentration. He called what remained mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and it worked for pain, for anxiety, for stress. Millions of people benefited. It was not a mistake. It was a trade-off, but every trade-off has a cost. And the cost was this. The thing Kabat-Zinn handed to the modern world was a meditation practice with no structural foundation beneath it, no sila, no ethical container, no map of the dukkha jnanas, no warning that stage 6 would feel like your mind was disintegrating, no teacher who had walked the terrain, just attention, just the lens, pointed inward at whatever happened to be there. Remember the pressure cooker? Sila is the valve. Kabat-Zinn removed the valve and called what was left the whole thing. He did not do it carelessly. He did it because the full system was untranslatable into a clinical protocol. But the result is the same. 40 years later, Willoughby Britton is documenting exactly the kind of breakdowns the Buddha predicted when he used the phrase miksha, samadhi. Concentration was without the foundation. So what did the full system actually look like? There is one story that shows all 8 steps working together, and it starts with a king who could not sleep. In the Pali text, there is a king named Pasenadi who ruled the kingdom of Kosala, one of the most powerful kingdoms in northern India during the Buddha's lifetime. He owned 3 palaces, one for each season. He employed musicians who played through the night, dancers, cooks who had spent their entire lives mastering a single dish. He had gardens, concubines, armies, elephants draped in gold. By any measure available to the ancient world, Pasenadi had everything a human being could acquire, and he could not sleep. The texts describe him as a man who ate compulsively, gorging at feasts until he could barely move, then lying awake in the dark, bloated and restless, mind spinnings through every threat to his kingdom, every rival, every son who might want the throne before it was time. He did not come to the Buddha as a devotee. He came as a man who had tried everything wealth could buy and found that none of it could quiet the noise in his own head. And here is what the Buddha did not do. He did not teach Pasenadi to meditate. He did not say, sit down, close your eyes, watch your breath. That would have been step 7. Pasenadi was not ready for step 7. The Buddha started with step 1. Right view, seeing clearly what was actually causing the suffering. Not the kingdom, not the rivals, the king's own relationship with consumption, with control, with the belief that acquiring more would eventually be enough. Then, right intention, the decision to change the pattern, not just understand it. Then, right speech, right action, right livelihood. How Pasenadi treated the people around him, how he governed, how he ate, how he used his power. The texts record that the Buddha gave Pasenadi 4 lines about paying attention to the body's signal that it had had enough. A guideline about stopping before fullness. The king asked a servant to memorize the verse and recite it before every meal. And slowly, not through meditation, not through concentration, not through any practice that required sitting still, Pasenadi began to change. He lost weight. He slept. He could think. The noise did not vanish, but it dropped to a volume he could work with. Only then, after Sila was in place. After the foundation was built, did anything resembling meditation enter the picture? And when it did, it had somewhere stable to land. The concentration did not amplify chaos, because the chaos had been addressed first. The lens was not pointed at unprocessed wreckage, because the wreckage had been cleaned before the lens was turned on. The Buddha did not design a pressure cooker. He designed a system with a valve built in. We just stopped installing it. This is what Britton's research points back to. Not that meditation is dangerous, not that you should stop practicing, but that the practice was never the whole system. The Buddha embedded concentration inside a structure that prepared the mind for what concentration would reveal. Modern mindfulness took the most powerful part of that structure, the lens, and handed it to people without the foundation, without the map, without the guide, and then acted surprised when some of those people saw things they were not ready to see. The 58% is not a flaw in the practice. It is a predictable outcome of using a precision instrument without its housing. Britton knows this. She does not argue against meditation. She argues for context, for restoring the structure that makes the practice safe. And the structure she describes in clinical language, using neuroscience and adverse effect data, is the same structure a man in northern India described 2,500 years ago using the words sila, samadhi, and panya. He never taught meditation alone. He taught meditation inside a system. And when you pull it out of that system, the thing that was supposed to free you starts breaking you instead. So here is what the Buddha actually taught about meditation, the part that almost no one passes along. First, meditation is not a standalone practice. It is steps 7 and 8 of a system that begins with how you see the world, how you speak to the people around you, how you earn your money, and how you direct your effort. The 6 steps before concentration are not optional warm-ups. They are the foundation that determines whether the practice heals you or destabilizes you. The Buddha called that foundation sila. Without it, concentration becomes miksha samadhi, a powerful lens pointed at an unprepared mind. Second, if your meditation practice is producing anxiety, dissociation, emotional flooding, or a feeling that reality is coming apart, that is not necessarily a sign you are doing it wrong. It may be a sign you have entered the dukkha nanas, a set of predictable stages that Buddhaghosa mapped 1,500 years ago, and that Willoughby Britton has now documented with clinical data. You are not broken. You are in a storm zone on a mountain trail that was always supposed to have a guide. The problem is not you. The problem is that you were handed a map with the storm zone removed. Third, you are not someone who failed at meditation. You are someone who was given a piece of a system and told it was the whole thing, the part no one taught you. The ethical foundation, the structural container, the 6 steps that come before sitting still, was not hidden because it is esoteric. It was removed because it was untranslatable into a 10-minute app session. Now you know the rest. And knowing the rest changes what meditation is. It is not an escape from your life. It is the last step in a process of aligning your life so thoroughly that when you finally sit down and look inward, what you find is not wreckage. It is clarity. Have you ever had a meditation experience that scared you? Something that no one warned you about? Tell me in the comments. Because the more people talk about this, the harder it becomes for anyone to pretend the warnings do not exist. If this changed how you think about meditation, subscribe. There is an entire system behind the practice. And this channel will keep showing you the parts that were left out. The Buddha did not say, do not meditate. He said, do not meditate alone, not without a teacher, not without a foundation, not without the 6 steps that make the 7th one safe. He said it 2,500 years ago. We are only now catching up.